breaking news. The tape never lies. Network breaking news. For Lord Cars.
Hear ye. Man to the people.
You know it's Cars Keys. Let's get it started up. Give me the car keys. Lakeshore Drive. Blog boys drive away with our takes like car thieves. Break down, we study tape and thrive.
Analytical preparation, that's what Cars is given. Cars don't discriminate, teaching the men and women. Each and every week, there's nerd to get your focus. Never manipulating stats, lore, cars no hocus pocus. Cars keys, they never lost. Checking source, never gonna find a better scouting report. Cars going live with the smartest man, my bestie. Deciphering holes on the defense like Getsy. New show, uniforms, orange with the dark seats. Tape never lies, patrons, this is Cars
You know
Keys.
it's Cars Keys. Let's get it started up. Give me the car keys. Lakeshore Drive. Blog boys drive away with our takes like car thieves. Break down, we study tape and thrive. We gotta break down tape like detectives. No hot takes, just real football perspectives. The Bears nerd dropping science on his terms. TTNL giving Bears press like a perm. Other networks is off with the heads. Stats plus film equals football thread. Analysis like data Ted tries to shred. McCaskey's letting me cake, we keep the 100 crew fed. Cars keys, let's get it started up. Give me the car keys. Lakeshore Drive. Blog boys drive away with our takes like car thieves. Break down, we study tape and thrive. Lord Hines in his car, fill up a goblin. Lord Hines in his car, fill up a goblin.
We're back. Cars Keys, Season 3, Episode 52. It's been a little while. Nobody's really here to see me, so let me go get this guy. There he is.
What's going on?
What's up, Cars?
You know, it's
Our Super Bowl. It's the NFL offseason.
I mean, we are undefeated in back-to-back off seasons. So,
Yeah.
you know, it's
Right. Fuck you, Bukowski.
Yeah, I mean, we might not get to a playoff game, but
Yeah.
off-season champs in 23 and 24. That's a banner that you can't fly either. So
Peter called me out for bringing up that imagine losing a home game to Caleb Williams because he was doing what Peter does so well by reverting to the Bears to make himself feel better about the Green Bay Packers.
no, Shane, you have it wrong. Remember, Bears fans are obsessed with Peter.
Yeah.
Definitely not the other way around.
And if you go back and look at the comments on Twitter, there's actual Packers fans in there begging and pleading Bears fans to please take Bukowski because Packers fans don't even like him. So,
I mean, doesn't their old fullback John Kuhn absolutely loathe him as a human being?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people that loathe Peter. Peter thinks he's the most important person in the world, but maybe he is in his world. That's the way it should be, I guess. But Peter's football dumb. We all know that, but that's not why we're here, man. We're on the precipice, not quite Christmas Eve yet for us, but the new league year is upon us. Monday.
Yeah.
I think we're going to get a lot of rumors coming down. Bears are probably going to have a new center. I know we're going to get into that because I get the Dahlman love. I just think that at the end of the day, I think he's probably been overrated by practically every single Bears fan out there just because it's such a massive need. And hey, if you get to average, that's a massive upgrade for Chicago. But
yeah, well, I think you're right, and it's one of those things where it's him or really Josh Myers, right? Or really the two names, and I'd probably rather Dahlman. It doesn't mean that he's not without his warts.
Right.
It doesn't mean he does, but also I don't know that he'd come into a better situation on a left and right side, however that sits down and plays out. So, and I also know people are going to lose their mind because he's definitely going to get overpaid because he's the only center, on the market. And when he gets, if whatever we think that he gets overpaid, Josh Myers is going to get even more overpaid, not from a dollar amount, but just position to value of what he's actually worth.
I totally agree. And Phil talked about Myers. Phil would be in on Myers over Dahlman. And I know there's people out there that want to bring in Kelly and then draft the center for behind him. But listen, there's injury concerns are going to be there with every single team. It just seems like they're more prevalent, unfortunately, in Chicago. People can come here healthy and they end up leaving injured somehow, but we'll see how it goes. But let's just get into it, man. I know that's probably what everybody wants to hear. How do you think that they're going to attack this? I don't think anybody leading up to this, I know I sure didn't. I didn't have Jonah Jackson and being acquired, and then I especially didn't have the Bears following it up 24 hours later with a top 2 or 3 offensive guard and Joe Thuney coming to Chicago. So just talk about that a little bit.
Well, I think, I get the need for pass rush and for defensive linemen. And I do think probably right out of the gate, you're going to see a move there. But I don't, if you actually look at who's under contract and where the depth is, there's nothing on the offensive line.
Yeah.
There's nothing at the wide receiver position, so and barely, there's barely anything at tight end because I think you really have two under contract, right? Where it's now Durham Smythe and Cole Kmet. And I know there's rumors about whether or not Kmet will be here or not. And that's a whole nother conversation. But look, if you had told me that Jackson and Thuney would be here, that's already a home run offseason. If you went in right now with Ryan Bates as your center, understanding all the warts that is at that situation, you are a significantly better offensive line. No shame to Tevin Jenkins. When healthy, when motivated, an incredible guard. But man, do I have to ask Chris the hell out of that?
Yeah.
We can't sit down and complain about Jonah Jackson and his injuries last year, and at the same time say we should have signed Tevin Jenkins. It just doesn't add up. So I really expect very similar, Shane, and very similar to the Lovey year of we walk with Peppers right away, and then other players along the way, like really quickly. I really kind of expect that to happen. I do think you're going to see one on. I think you're going to see Khalil Mack. If that is not like the Dr. Evil looking at Scott going, "Let's come back to me" moment.
Yeah, I mean, I texted Phil and Cap in our little text thread, and I'm like, I understand there's other players in there, but everybody's retired except for Khalil Mack in that little promo that they sent out. And Mack was also in there like 4 or 5 times in that promo. And the timing says a lot. And I'm a big Khalil Mack fan. And when you got to look beyond the field, you're rebuilding a locker room. You bring in a guy like Khalil Mack on that side of the football, he's going to command respect from Montez Sweat, who's making all the money on the defensive side of the ball. He's not going to go up to Khalil Mack and tell him what's what. Khalil Mack is going to be the lead dog over there in the locker room. He's not a loud, boisterous guy, but he's going to command respect, just like Joe Thuney is. Guess what? We're going to have some linemen as captain's cars if that happens.
Well, but I think you touched on that, and it's extremely important. So you can argue a lot about the hits and misses of Ryan Poles, right? You're going to see that across every general manager. But the biggest issue that you truly have is why some of the reasons that things have happened inside of the locker room have been the most talented players on this team are not vocal leaders.
Yep.
I
Totally
would
agree.
think the last year, the only two that were really vocal, Edmonds is not much of a, Tremaine is not much of a vocal leader. People are drawn to him, but he's very laid back. He's very quiet overall. He's a leader of that linebacking room. Edwards talks a little bit more, right? And that's a
Yep.
guy who I think is going to take another step this year. But to now have two guys in the trenches who have done it, who have performed at a high level, who are going to be players that coaching staff can lean on. Last year when things got bad for Eberflus and co,
Yep.
who did they lean on? Nobody. There was
Yeah.
a vacuum of leadership all the way to the coach was not much of a leader.
Right. Yeah,
And-
and that's the thing, Cars, where they did their talking was not in the locker room. Again, and I know it gets brought up a lot, and these guys, listen, I'm not against these guys having podcasts, and you can talk about things that are going on in the game, but they were openly taking everybody behind the scenes what was going on in the locker room, in leadership meetings. And that speaks to a fractured culture right there. And that should have been handled day fucking one. The first nugget that comes out about what's going on in leadership meetings, if I'm the head coach, if I'm Ryan Poles, if I'm the fucking owner, I am going to that player, and that shit is handled right then and there.
Well,
And it never was.
And go back all the way to the first season, right? When everything happened with Alan Williams and nobody jumped to the forefront. Nobody came up. And so I think you're right, Shane. Like, it should have been handled, but it also shows the problem of the leadership council that was there. Because if you're a leader, if you're an actual leader, and Jalen Johnson was one of the few that didn't actually do it until after the season. So this is not a shot at Jalen. I thought he handled this well. But from everybody else, from what you've heard, if you're the one that's sitting there talking, that's a bad leader. And so I don't understand, again, it's been the biggest vacuum for polls this entire time. It's really been a thing, and it seems to be the focus. And so I think when you look at some of these moves of players that are coming, yeah, man, I mean, I think you're going to see a different quality that's going to be kind of at the core of this. And I think there's a lot of intriguing little free agents coming around that are traitsy guys that necessarily maybe not have worked out, or Mekhi Becton, who moved to guard, looks a little bit better. Do they bring him in as a potential? Wills out of Cleveland. Is that, do you just take a shot because of the talent? But you're going to be able to do those things because now you've got a Tooney on the other side of in that line with them that's going to be able to coach them, guide them. And with Ruchar as a line coach, you're going to get a whole lot more leadership just up and down.
Yeah, and that's the thing where, how we roll here. We want to rely on people that have been there, done that. And when we had Olin on, we asked him about the new offensive line coach, and Olin thought that he was the best one that was available of the names that he saw. And he's like, yeah, that's who I was hoping that they were going to pivot to, because he's extremely no nonsense. It's all about blocking. And if you're not going to block, you're not going to be in there. Doesn't care about what your name is, doesn't care about what your contract is. If you're not going to block, if you're not going to do your part, you're not going to be on the field. You're not going to be getting the reps. And that's all we ask for. I mean, after the Cars, we saw how you could tell right from Jump Street. I think initially when Nate Davis was signed, with him being like 26 years old and, a position on the offensive line, an upside there, I think people were excited. But right from Jump Street, when OTAs kicked off, you're a new free agent signing, he just doesn't show up. And that showed you everything of where this was going to be going. And I know that he had I never got confirmation on it. They were saying that his mother may have passed away, and then he missed time. And hey, I understand all of that, but he was never bought in at any point in Chicago, and that is I don't want to say he's a big money guy, but he was a big money guy on this team because it was stripped down so much.
Oh, he
And
was the
yeah,
highest paid offensive lineman, I feel like, right? I mean,
yeah,
without question. And,
yeah,
and there are things that come around. And I don't know if you remember, but like the Vrabel thing was coming out like that. Even when we signed him, the belief was like Vrabel hated the guy because he
yeah,
didn't seem to love it. And I think, again, when you go back to this and you see what they've done, they got a guy that loves it, right? And
yeah.
in Tooney, and I think Jackson does as well. And I think some of that, when you get injured at the point in time that Jonah does, it's really hard to come back, especially early. You can probably do so later in the season, but you're playing into shape. It's what's always hurt Tevin, right? When you miss so much camp, your body never gets right.
Well, and that speaks to, I mean, you can pivot to Karan Amagaji, a kid that was hurt in his collegiate season and really no off season. And we know how hectic it is when you come out for the draft and you're preparing for that and you're injured on top of it, and really no training camp, essentially no season, thrown to the wolves in a horrible situation that Matt Eberflus and company put him in. It was the Washington game?
Yeah, the Washington game.
And I mean, that we all see how that ended, but that's the thing. It's hard for any veteran to even come back under those circumstances. And listen, Karan's got a long way to go, but I'm not done with Karan. But I'm glad that the Bears didn't make the choice of, he's a draft pick, we're going to put him in there, see what happens, because that has been the Bears' blueprint in the past for as long as you and I have been Bears fans. I mean, going back to Mark Hatley, to Jerry Angelo, to Phil Emery, all these guys, that's what they did. That they would throw money at a problem, and those guys, they were going to get every rep out of those guys, whether it was warranted or not.
And I think that's the one thing that we do. Well, I keep saying the one thing, but I think that is something that we give credit to Ryan Poles for. Like the one pick that everybody complains about still being on the roster is Dominique Robinson, but he hasn't been starting and isn't getting a ton of snaps.
Right.
But other franchises, they would have forced or other general managers, that would have been a move that was forced down our throat. Karan would have been a move that was forced down our throat. And I think the encouraging thing is, before they got there, they did try other players, right? There were other things. And obviously with now Larry Borum most likely gone, Karan is one of the ones that's up there for a swing tackle position, which is a better place for him to be right away than to be stepping into that left tackle. Bears franchises in the past, or Bears franchise leaders, would have been like, let's move Braxton and clear a space, right? Or we don't need to go get a Joe Tooney. We'll just trade. We'll just put Karan in at the other guard position, since we just did a Jonah. We talked about this when they went out and got Edmonds and Edwards. So there is some differences here, and I like it. But I think they're going to look at folks that are younger and not as injured. So like Ryan Kelly is a hard pass for everything.
Always hurt. Yeah.
Always hurt. And if Indy, which has all these offensive line problems already, if Indianapolis is unwilling to sign you and lets you go, that is a second red flag. I think if you look at Andre James, might be a nice little fallback issue. I don't know where they're going to feel. He's a solid center. And I would actually look at James now before I would look at Myers, the way that it's played out. So there are fallbacks, there are moves. But they're going to be aggressive. I think one of the things that we need to look at is, again, if they sign a defensive end and a defensive tackle. That's all they're doing on the defensive side. Because when it comes to the depth on this offense, when it comes to starters on this offense, there's one unknown starter position on defense. It's defensive end. There is an unknown at wide receiver number 3. There's an unknown at wide receiver, at center. And, from running back, from tight end to, is Bill Murray going to be a guy that's a swing? Like your backup offensive lineman, just so everybody's understanding, Ryan Bates, Bill Murray, Ricky Stromberg, Theo Benedict.
Yeah, and then they claimed Jordan McFadden.
Yes.
So they have then, and are you going to, I would have no issue with them bringing back a Matt Pryor on a 1 year deal. Yeah.
He played very well at guard. When we moved into tackle, it wasn't the same. You know what? That's fine.
Yep.
There's positions there. But when you go back to the draft as well, the draft is much heavier on defense than it is on offense this year. And so it just makes sense that if it's Khalil Mack, you're not getting Milton Williams. If it's Milton Williams, you're not getting Khalil Mack. You're more likely to potentially draft a defensive end than at number 10 because, other than the Mississippi guy whose name is escaping me right now at defensive tackle and Mason Graham, there isn't a lot of whole defensive tackle prospects. There's a lot more athletic freaks on the defensive end side. But on offense, man, it's slim pickings everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good draft for defensive tackles overall myself, but they have to. I mean, Cars, we get past. We'll see with Zach Pickens. My confidence level in him
negative
making any sort of an impact is 0. I mean, I could see him not even on the roster. They just move off of him. Billings is an older player, as good as he's been coming back from the pack. You have to look at that. And then Jervon Dexter is much hype as he had last year, and he had his moments. And again, I get it. How do you expect him to be consistent when he's surrounded by inconsistency with the people that are around him? But man, they have to. The defensive tackle group as a whole is poor. There's upside there, but man, I mean, I love Andrew Billings. Do I feel confident that he's going to last the entirety of a season? I don't.
Not if you don't add depth. That's why he got nicked up, is because they couldn't rely on anybody else. And for all the folks out there freaking out over the Chris Williams thing, they can cut him at any point in time if they backfill it. It's just to make sure that they've got a body and a rotational piece in there. Please, let's kind of relax. But I'm pretty sure you agree with me. There's 0% chance that the Bears should be looking at trading up at all.
Oh, no. Yeah, hell no.
As much as I love Mason Graham, you're just not. It just doesn't make sense to do from the standpoint of you have too many holes, and the way that this roster has been built, you've got a lot of draft picks coming in. You need to be able to backfill with youth. I think they've done very well in the UDFA market. I'm intrigued by Benedict.
Yeah,
I'm intrigued as a depth piece by Stromberg. When we did mock drafts 2 years ago, he was the one that a lot of fans and us kind of had penciled in as a potential piece. And I don't blame what happened in Washington on him.
Right.
But you've really got to start to stockpile and keep going. And I keep seeing in the chat, like, Dexter is average. We looked at the leap he made from year 1 to year 2 was significant on the defensive side. It wasn't enough. But if we remember where he was coming from and how poorly he was used at Florida and the way that he's learned, it was always going to be a year 3, this is who he's going to be. This is his year of whatever he is. He might be a guy, Shane, that's better suited outside after all of this happens.
And they've flirted with it in the past, Cars, and I've thought about that too. But I mean, either way, he's going to be on the team. I think there's upside there. He's still very, very young.
Oh, he's
a guy
great player, rotationally at least.
Yep, he's a guy that got his football start very, very late. He was a basketball guy.
Yeah.
So
and then Florida happened, and
yeah, I think he played 3 years at Florida. I think he played like a year or maybe a year and a half in high school, 3 years at Florida, and then boom, you're in the NFL. So he's still very, very young in his NFL life. And I know that sounds like excuses to some people, but you surround him with some talent, with talent, that
and
veteran
coaching.
leadership. There's nothing there.
And coaching.
Yeah, and exactly, and coaching.
There's a difference between the way that Matt was able to call plays and then everything else that happened in that locker room. And again, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but the questions inside the locker room started in the preseason and came to a head week 1.
Yeah.
Week 1, there was already discord in the locker room. So, yeah.
Yeah, I just look at it. I think that they have to go heavy on the defensive line. If you sign Khalil Mack, and like you said, I think it was Scottish Bear maybe the other night asked me, if you signed Milton Williams in free agency, would that prevent you from drafting the kid from Michigan? It wouldn't, Cars. It wouldn't stop me from drafting him. I always revert to Philly because you know what? As much as I hate the Eagles and as much as I hate Howie Roseman, he fucking gets it. You have Fletcher Cox. What do? You go out and you get Jalen Carter. And oh, by the way, you still had Milton Williams on your team. They're now they're trying to go get Myles Garrett on their team because they're letting Josh Sweat and Milton Williams hit free agency to get the comp picks. You have to throw, and I know this is a played out analogy, but it's also true. When you think you have enough, you don't. And the Bears are beyond Montez Sweat. And listen, Bears fans need to understand Montez Sweat is not an elite edge rusher. He's very good. He's not elite.
I don't disagree.
Who do we have after that? There's nobody. We got excited last year over Darrell Taylor, who had 2 sacks in week 1, and then he didn't have another one until what, week 16 or something like that? It was super late. But you have to throw, if they go out and sign Khalil Mack and the best player is on their board is Mikael Williams at 10, then you have to take him.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, because you can't go forcing some of these things to happen. Now, would it shock me if for a year, if they came in, that they did more on the offensive side? No, right? Because the offense is coming from such a deficit. It would not shock me if they went through and looked and kind of rated some of these offensive players a little bit higher. Would, as talented as he is, it does make the idea of like a Genti a little bit more questionable at 10. Not that I'm going to be utterly upset, but you're talking about a rotational player at a running back position. And that's not meant anymore in the sense that he's going to be splitting carries. You're looking for difference makers. You're looking for upgrades. Is that if you're sitting there in the face and it's like Will Campbell and Genti, do you go for the guy who has a chance to be the left tackle and a massive upgrade for the next 10 years to protect your quarterback? Or do you look at doing a running back, which again, Saquon Barkley won a Super Bowl as a top 10 pick, but he continues the trend as another one who doesn't win it with the team that drafts him inside the top 10. The only one that's done it to my understanding, in the 2000s is Todd Gurley. So it's running back is a great position. It's super important. It is definitely devalued in this league, but it's oftentimes a luxury pick for teams that don't need to do it. You know, Zeke Elliott had this great career. Has it been worth it? Was it really worth it? The fifth pick overall for Dallas? No. You could look at Adrian Peterson, right? As great as he was, as wonderful as he was, did it make a difference for the Vikings to truly have him when games mattered? No. So you've got to look, the positions that matter are the trenches. Philadelphia had 3 of the top 11 paid offensive linemen, if I remember correctly, into that Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Across the entire NFL.
I'm co-signing big time what Bear Truth 9 is speaking here. That's
Done.
my blueprint. That's
But
where I'm at.
You can't get 5 players with the first 4 picks. But
yeah, right. That's true.
I'm just teasing you. No, but I think when you look at free agency, that's going to be it. I do think that you might see a player like a Josh Reynolds or like a Darius Slayton as an additional wide receiver that they could add to the room. But the money is going to be in those trenches. The draft picks have to be in those trenches. I know I said on Wednesday, and I am to a degree going to stand by it, that I think Tyler Warren is definitely in play, especially depending on things that happen there at the tight end position, because he is a difference maker.
I couldn't do it.
I know you couldn't, but I knew that once Brock Bowers happened, and I'm not saying that he's at that level of Brock Bowers, but this isn't Kyle Pitts again, right? Like, this isn't that type of move again. It's a different skill set. But if you're telling me, like, you go through the first 3 rounds or first 2 rounds, and let's just throw it out. Like, it's Will Campbell at 10, it's Nolan in the second round, and it's another edge there in the second round. Are you happy? Absolutely. Because it makes the biggest difference for this team. And so you just keep rotating, and you need depth, because if you're one injury away from having a below average line, guess what? During the season, you're going to have a below average line. It happens every time.
I don't even really understand this. Stop talking about Philly. They won, but they're not the model. Kansas City is.
Kansas City lost because they couldn't compete offense at the offensive line against their defensive line, and the defensive line versus their offensive line.
I'll take Philly's model all fucking day.
Kansas City was not as dominant this season. Why? They haven't, look, for every Trey Smith and Creed Humphrey, they haven't drafted extremely well. They haven't rebuilt very well. You know, Chris Jones has been great. Who's it? Karlaftis is really great. But the rest of those players haven't stepped up, haven't done it. So if you look at who in our division was incredible, the Detroit Lions, because they had a line that could stop everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Kansas City's offensive line was hot garbage down the stretch.
And this is the name I know Kerry Franklin brought up, Jonathan Banks Jr. We broke him down, and this is the thing too. And I think people need to realize there's no difference between 10 and 15 in almost every draft. In this draft, quite honestly, Cars, and we've heard a ton of people talk about it, there's not a lot of difference between 10 and 32.
Oh, the player that they're going to get with their first, second round pick is not going to be that different from there. And I always use this example, Shane. 2 years ago, when we're doing mock drafts, we drafted Darnell Wright in a mock draft in the second round for the Bears. And when we did early season mocks for that, the mock simulators gave us C's sometimes for drafting Darnell Wright in the second round. Right? he went 10th.
Yeah.
So when we start saying like this player is going to be available, this player is going to be available, there is still an entire offseason to happen before any of those people move. Last year, it was like, okay, once you get past the big three, you'll be in the late first and still be able to pick up another quarterback. What happened? Bo Nix went 12th, and he was the 4th or 5th quarterback at that point taken, right? So everybody that we're sitting down, like they're going to be there, they're going to be there. We do not know. And can you show up the scrolls what he just said there as well? Because the Rams, guess what? What did the Rams spend the offseason doing in the draft?
Exactly.
Rebuilding a defensive line and an offensive line.
Yeah, and I mean, he says that he wants to build the team in Ryan Poles and Ben Johnson's visions, in Ben Johnson's vision, not Howie Roseman. But you just said that Kansas City is the model. So it's the model is to draft good football players and develop them.
Ben Johnson's model is to build from the trenches.
Yes, exactly, and that's what did he say in his opening presser? They asked him, "Do you think that there's a chance that you can rebuild the offensive line in an offseason?" He's like, "Yeah." He brought up Carolina. What did Carolina do last year? They reset the guard market.
Yeah, with Hunt and I forget the other guy. The guy from Miami, and I know what you're talking about, but yeah.
But yeah, that's what they did. And I mean, and that was the Bears' first 2 big swings with a guy that he's familiar with. And who's going to pass on Joe Tooney for a future 4th-round pick?
And it's
if you can afford him financially, yeah.
Like, look, every year we're like, who knows what moves are going to be made because nobody, somebody's going to fall in love with player. That's going to happen. It happens every year. And a lot of times we can't make heads or tails of it. Years ago, or was it 2 years ago, when the Lions moved down to draft Jahmyr Gibbs, would anyone have believed that they would have drafted the linebacker out of Iowa with that second first-round pick? But they fell in love. It happens for all the weirdest reasons. The Giants told Micah Parsons that they were going to draft him, traded down so that they could draft Kadarius Toney, who had the hands of...
Oh, yeah. I mean, horrible.
Just awful hands. But they fell in love with the trait. We always go back to talking about Mike Mamula. Could not put it on tape consistently, but was a workout warrior and put all of those things. The safety from Connecticut that ended up getting drafted by the Raiders. I can't remember his name. Workout warriors. This is what's going to happen, especially in a draft like this, Shane, to your point, where the difference between who you get at 10 and who you get at 40 is going to be minimally different. Someone is going to fall in love. Do I think there's a chance that Mason Graham is going to fall? Hell yeah, I do.
The more days that pass, Cars, the more I believe he's going to be in there because teams love traits. Teams love athletic freaks. And I know Phil and I have talked about Shamar Stewart a lot. Phil is higher on him than I am. That dude scares the hell out of me if you draft him at 10. Listen, does he fit the part? Yes, he does. How does that physical freak go through an entire collegiate season with a sack and a half and like 4 in his career in college? How?
Oh, it's insane. It's insane.
Is that gonna get better in the NFL? Maybe.
Who's the guy that the Raiders drafted 2 years ago at defensive end from
Tyree Wilson? Yeah.
Tyree Wilson, right? It's
with a bad wheel. He had a bad foot, remember?
That's what's going to happen. Right? Like these things consistently happen. So what you're going to see, do I think there's a chance that the Bears trade down unless they're blown away by who's available, absolutely, right? If they're sitting there at 10 and Mason Graham's not there and Will Campbell's not there, I think he's gone. I think they're dropping out of that position. They're going to find someone. They're going to drop back.
Well, yeah, and you hope that somebody, you want a guy like Jackson Dart to continue his ascent up the.
He's
up
going
the
in the
charts.
top 15.
Well, that's
if
what I'm
not top
saying,
10.
and that's when you're at 10. If he's still there, you want a team to be like, we gotta go
We
get
need
our guy,
him.
because you know who else is going to help with that cars is Bo Nix last year.
Oh, if you've got an offensive coach, what offensive coach is not going to go, I can do for this guy what Peyton did for Bo Nix?
Yeah.
Right? You're going to see that happen over and over and over again. So absolutely.
And that's the thing. I should have started. Somebody had, maybe it was Scottish Bear. Yeah, it was. Poles may pass on Mason Graham because he's a stickler for measurables. That's where I think that Ben Johnson
and Dennis Allen.
And Dennis Allen, right? They want football players. Mason Graham, listen, we're talking about him not having measurables, and yes, he measured in at 296 at the combine. He wanted to trim some weight to get faster. His playing weight was actually 315. Saying that he's lacking measurables at 6'3", 296. Come on. He's an amazing an amazing football player. He is. He comes here, cars. I think he's the engine to your defense.
You know who else was undersized? Tommy Harris.
Yeah. Yeah, they're
what
built
was he?
The same, right?
He was the engine.
Yeah, right. There's a fucking name. Yeah, if everybody was like Sean Oakman, yeah, exactly.
It's like, and he's been good, right? But when you start looking at traits and that's what you put available, if you were the Jacksonville Jaguars right now, would you rather have Tavon Walker or would you rather have Aiden Hutchinson? If they went back in that draft, where do you think they're going?
Right.
Who's been the more dominant player?
Yeah.
But who went higher? Because of traits and measurables and all of these things.
Right.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's, I get it, man. It's just, overall, the Bears have been a poor drafting team, and that really hasn't changed. They've had their ups. They've had some guys that are good, but cars, we know when they made the Super Bowl, their first pick was Greg Olson. And then after that, everything changed. Everything did. And it's just miss after miss after miss. You're talking second and third round draft picks that didn't even make the team.
Mm-hmm.
And it's continued. Not saying they're bad enough to not make the team, but just not good enough. It's got to change. Sometimes you got to look beyond the measurables. Sometimes you just got to draft good football players. And that's what the Bears need to do this year. I think they're going to have a chance to.
I think sometimes we fall in love with measurables way too much.
I agree.
It's one of those things. It becomes this thing of you need the tape has to measure tie into the measurables. The measurables have to tie into the tape.
Right.
So when you have this guy, and again, Shamar Stewart is wonderful as a physical specimen, right? He's the closest to looking like Myles Garrett of anyone. But it's 1.5 sacks.
Yeah.
So what is that actually? So he has all these measurables. He's got all this skill. He's got all this talent. Okay. If he can't put it together in college, now Texas A&M again was another school that had all sorts of headaches and misery. But how many of those guys that were not a great pass rusher in college became great pass rushers in the pros. Especially if they're sat down and drafted in the top 10 with all of this pressure that goes along with it. You just don't see it. You just don't see it at all. And so when you go back and look and you go, hey, what's the engine? I love Jahmyr Gibbs. Jahmyr Gibbs is great. What made him really go? That offensive line is really the difference maker. If you look at
that's
wrong.
Not true, right?
It's 4. Saquon Barkley, Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Josh Jacobs were first-round picks. And guess what? 2 of those aren't playing with the team that drafted them. Derrick Henry was a second-round pick. Jonathan Taylor was a second-round pick. Kyron Williams was an undrafted free agent. Chuba was a second-round pick. Aaron Jones, I believe, was a 4th-round pick. And Bucky Irving was, I think, a 3rd, maybe?
Bucky Irving went, I believe, right after we took Torrey Taylor, did he not?
That might be.
I think so.
So, and again, when you look at that top list, number 1 didn't get drafted by Philly. Number 2 did not get drafted by Baltimore. Josh Jacobs did not get drafted by Green Bay. Aaron Jones did not get drafted by Minnesota. So, yeah, you could draft these guys all day, but go back in time. Go to drafthistory.com, look at drafts by running backs, and go look at how many of them have done anything.
Yeah, and listen, I love Ashton Genty, Cars. You heard me talk about him like last summer, how much I loved him. You can't draft a running back at 10. You can't.
If they move down, I'm all for it. But there's a difference.
I still couldn't do it in the first round.
But there's a difference, Shane.
Yeah.
The reason Detroit drafted Jahmyr Gibbs and all of his talent, number 12 overall, is because they already had the offensive line to block for him.
Yep.
They already had Penei Sewell. They already had Taylor Decker. They already had Glasgow at center, right? They already had all of those things to make him effective. Saquon showed flashes in New York. He also got his ACL torn and got beaten up. Why? Because the New York Giants have had a terrible
tore his ACL in Chicago.
Yeah, had a terrible offensive line and couldn't block for him. There is one position more than any other that is impacted by the offensive line, and that's running back. So if you don't have that offensive line figured out, I don't really give a damn who you draft at running back. They're not going to be effective. And that's why you see some of these guys doing so well in second teams. Josh Jacobs had a tremendous year. What's the difference between the Raiders offensive line and the Packers offensive line? It's night and day. And the play caller, night and day.
Right. And Googly Bear is asking, why can't you take him in the top 10? And Cars just told you why. And, oh, yeah, by the way, this is one of the deepest running back draft classes ever, to the point where you're going to have 18 to 20 running backs taken. I'm not saying they're all going to be starters, but there's going to be contributors. And I feel like I can get you a top level back at 72.
Oh, I mean, if you do this and I'm a fan of Henderson out of Ohio State.
Travion, yeah.
If that's a move that you make,
yeah,
that's a home run. That's a home run. And look, most of these teams, when you look at who was in the playoffs and who had success, right? Jahmyr Gibbs was splitting carries pretty much all season until David Montgomery got hurt.
Yeah.
Right? When you look at some of these different playoff teams and you go through a lot of these guys, this idea that there's a bell cow is not good for you. There were 4 players that had over 300 carries. 2 of them didn't make the playoffs, and that's Taylor and Bijan. You don't. After that, you start. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed Jacobs and Kyron Williams. But most of these guys, they're splitting carries, they're splitting time. It is running back by committee. That's not because the running backs aren't good enough, but it's because one, they don't have an offensive line that's as dominant as Philadelphia, and two, these carries come at a cost. Again, look at Ezekiel Elliott and how great he was early, and then look what happened when he hit the wall. DeAndre Hopkins has been a great wide receiver, and we started to see those wheels fall off this past year. How many years into his career is that? Whereas you look at Zeke Elliott, after year 4, he started to fall down. Year 4 of 300, 240, 300, 300. He's not been a 300 carry person ever since. Derrick Henry's a freak of nature. You're not going to find someone like him again that can take that pounding and keep going. But for most guys, 4 consecutive 300 plus carry years mean that you are winding down and you are done because of the beating that you take.
Right. And googly that you're not going to draft 2 running backs within the first 3 rounds. It doesn't make you better. It doesn't. DeAndre Swift isn't going anywhere. DeAndre Swift is going to be a more effective running back used in tandem. He's not a lead back. If you go out and you get a Quinshon Judkins, or Cars talked about Travion Henderson.
Or Marion Hampton out of North Carolina. Yeah.
Which there's a lot of talk about him sneaking into the end of the first round. So, but just either way, you're not going to draft 2 more running backs. It's not good business, first off.
You don't do it because you're better.
Who on earth would draft the running back in the top 10 and then take another one at 72? That'd be a dumb football team.
But if you draft and you build that trench, we have seen more average running backs lifted by better offensive lines than we have seen great running backs elevate a average to below average offensive line. Like, Kyron Williams is a fun player, but some of what makes him go is the offensive line and the scheme that makes him pop off a little bit. Josh Jacobs is a fine player and had some good years in the Raiders, but his best years have been when there has been blocking. And that's what made him go from a under 4 yard per carry guy to what he saw last year. Alex H brings up a great one. Look at David Montgomery in a Bears uniform, and then look at David Montgomery in a Detroit Lions uniform. Guess what? David's still not popping the big breakaway explosive runs that he wasn't doing here. But you know what he's doing? He's consistently getting 5, 6, 7 yards because the offensive line is good. Harvey got great. If you build that offensive line, guess what? I'm a big fan of Ian Wheeler. He's not going to stop me from drafting a running back at all. But I can tell you what, if you have a really good offensive line, Ian Wheeler is going to be a player that's going to look better. I'm not saying that's a 1,000-yard rusher, but if you have a running back committee and it's him, Roshan Johnson, and DeAndre Swift, and you get 650 yards out of all 3 of those guys and 4+ a pop, that's a winning year for you.
Right. And Scrolls, so
1985. 1985.
And Philly just did it this year with Saquon Barkley, who they got in free agency. But name me another team before Philly, and I'll just throw it in the chat. I'll wait. Who was the last great running back to lead their team to a Super Bowl?
Jamal Lewis, Cleveland, Baltimore Ravens, 2001 or 2000. Yeah, 2000.
Yeah,
that's it. But Saquon, as great, this doesn't take away from what he is. Philadelphia has 3 of the highest paid offensive linemen.
The best offensive line in the NFL.
NFL.
Cars, we talked about it on a show, I believe on Cars Keys. that if you took Philadelphia's backups on their offensive line, that they would start on most teams.
Yeah.
They
Yeah,
have
I
an
mean,
amazing offensive line because that is their blueprint. Invest in the lines. And then when they
Jordan
go
Mal-
offense, it's playmakers. Yeah,
Jordan Mailata is insane.
exactly.
And then we were hoping to draft Cam Jurgens one year, and Philadelphia drafted him to be a backup to be ready for when Kelsey left. So you've got Landon Dickerson, you've got Cam Jurgens, you've got Mailata, Lane Johnson will come back and be healthy this year. Like, that's an insane investment.
Yeah.
And Mailata was what, like a later round pick? Like, I think he was.
Mailata, they drafted in like round 7.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, he was the Australian rugby player.
And so they've done all of these things.
But Cam Jurgens in the second round, Landon Dickerson in the second round, and they keep on swinging. Who is the offensive line? They draft offensive tackle that they took in the first round.
Dillard.
Andre Dillard didn't work out, and he went to Tennessee and signed a deal. Didn't work out there, but the Bears just have never heavily invested into it. And then when they get one guy, it's the Jay Cutler effect. Cars. The Bears traded for Jay Cutler and essentially said, you know what? We're going to go out and sign an aging Orlando Pace, who everybody essentially knew was done. And all right, the offense is fixed. That's what they need. We got him the quarterback. That's it.
And he was still an upgrade, by the way.
Right.
That's how bad of an
Right.
offensive line we had. No, I think
This is a great. We forgot about Marshawn, so you could put him in there with.
Okay,
Seattle.
absolutely,
Yep.
absolutely. But when you go back and look at it, who's Kansas City's best players on offense outside of Patrick Mahomes? It's Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith. Because they had
and Joe
ignored
Thuney.
Joe Thuney, and they had Orlando Brown, and because he was leaving, they swung and massively missed on Jamal Taylor, right? That's his name, right? Jamal. Yeah.
Jamar.
No,
Jamal. Yeah. Jamar Taylor was a corner.
They massively swung and missed at that. And so what had they been drafting? Well, we traded away Cheetah, so we drafted Xavier Worthy. We've made all of these secondary moves, but they have not been drafting so well. What you have to do time and time again is draft through the trenches. I hate the Green Bay Packers. Every year, how many offensive line are they guaranteed to draft? 3.
Yeah.
Each and every time. And
that's how they find a guy like Zach Tom. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Draft him late.
Tiari?
And listen, I don't want to shit on Torrey Taylor, but listen, I agree with Tom Waddle. It was a fucking cocky pick. It was our roster is set pick.
Yep.
Could have taken an offensive lineman there. I said it on draft day. Torrey's a good punter. I get it. Was it a massive glaring need?
Well, yes, but
yeah, I just don't. I don't think it was dictating our season.
The difference between a 50-yard a punt punter and a 40-yard a punt punter is negligible overall to where we are.
Right, and he's the word on the street is Sam Darnold.
Sam Darnold or Daniel Jones.
Yeah, but it sounds like Minnesota is trying to get Daniel Jones to return to Minnesota and then Sam Darnold to Seattle. That's a lot of the talk that's going on out there right now. So, but there's going to listen. Quarterbacks always come into play, always. So we'll see.
It's going to be crazy because someone else that's going to be a fringe, Kyle McCord, is going, way up in the second round, I feel like right now, Shane.
Who is?
McCord.
Oh, I talked about it. I wouldn't draft any of these quarterbacks. I would have Cam Ward. I see the allure in Cam Ward. I'm glad that the Bears are not in that game of having to go quarterback this year because I don't love any of them. I wouldn't draft if I was running a team. I wouldn't draft any of these guys. And a couple of months ago when we were talking about it, I said to you, I'm like, I like Jackson Dart and Kyle McCord better than any of these guys because I thought I could get them later. And now Jackson Dart is on this Bo Nix like ascension where he could essentially maybe even go top fucking 10, which is, I get it.
That's the hope. The hope, if you're a Bears fan right now, is he's available at 10 and someone is super thirsty for him.
Yeah.
And you make a move down. Absolutely. Like it's insane. It's just insane what these things happen because what have you seen? If you don't have a quarterback, you don't have a chance.
Exactly. Yeah.
If you have just a decent passable quarterback, you have a chance.
Ken Morford says it, man. And again, when I'm saying this, guys, I love Ashton Genty. If the Bears roster was constructed a little bit different, if we were a little bit farther into the process, I get it. Even if you were drafting there, I understand it. You can't do it right now. And it might have been Scrolls or somebody else had it in there saying that you're not getting the best offensive lineman or the best defensive lineman at 10. Nobody knows that. Nobody knows that.
But Shane, 2 years ago, this same exact conversation happened. And it was with the other Ashton Genty product, Bijan. Right? Bijan has been, they didn't use him a ton first year. They used him a ton second year. Still haven't made a playoff. Still hasn't made.
You think Detroit would trade Jameer for Bijan straight up?
No,
of course they wouldn't.
No. And so it's you have to, but drafting a running back, you are putting a roof on a house that doesn't have walls yet.
Right. Oh yeah, it's buying the hot tub.
Yeah.
With no foundation.
Yeah.
Look how cool this is.
This is incredible. It doesn't mean that these people aren't good players. It doesn't mean that, Bijan is not going to have a great career. But the higher likelihood is we'll be sitting here in 5 years going, man, look at Genty doing so well with team XYZ because we allowed him to get beat up for so long because we don't have the line. Saquon is great. He's made better by the line. Derrick Henry is the exception to everything because he played with some terrible offensive lines and terrible quarterback play in Tennessee. But everybody else on that list, you want to look at every running back that's up there, Jonathan Taylor, Jahmyr Gibbs is great. Josh Jacobs is inflated by that offensive line. Kyron Williams is upgraded. Chuba Howard, because the Panthers invested in guards, that's why they still drafted somebody else this past year to play running back because they thought he wasn't going to be the player because he hadn't done it so far. All of a sudden, you add 2 guards that aren't turnstiles, and Chuba goes from 3.8 yards to 4.8 yards a carry, and they signed him to an extension because of that. It just happens over and over again. James Conner was an afterthought in Pittsburgh because Pittsburgh's offensive line has been terrible, and he's been a revelation in Arizona, which has a slightly better line, and it makes a difference.
So, Jazz, this is actually quite easy to fucking answer is because of the Ben Johnson effect.
Yep.
And we're seeing it playing out right in front of our eyes. What do we just do? The first two moves under Ben Johnson. I mean, there's been some smaller, minor moves. They grabbed a wide receiver from Detroit to a futures contract. I get that, but going out and trading for Jonah Jackson, who he's familiar with, going out and trading for Joe Tooney to fortify the interior of the line. That's not the Ryan Poles effect. It's the Ben Johnson influence because he sees it. He lived it in Detroit. That's where it all starts. And they're not done yet. You don't have a center. Big hole at left tackle. We don't know how Braxton Jones is going to return from the injury. Karan Amagaji, huge question mark. We don't know. Do they have BPA at 10 as a left tackle? Maybe. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that they don't. We'll see.
I think 9, though, is also influenced by the fact that Alt and Latham going before Rome. It's clear that they did not have a big grade on Olu, and let's be honest, Olu struggled. Maybe if Ben Johnson's here, Fuaga's a guy that gets a harder look at 9 as opposed to everybody else.
In Cars, we were told, and I mean multiple times at this point, that was the pivot for Chicago. If Rome wasn't there, they were going to bounce out, and then Fuaga was going to be the target.
Yep. It wasn't Olu. So
right.
some of these things are absolutely impacted by the way the draft board falls, but also, Poles should answer to this, right? He and Cunningham have come in and said, we know that you build through the trenches. We know, and then have done dick for it. And when you look at in back-to-back years, it's this kind of like you had opportunities for offensive linemen. You went Darnell Wright, I still think is going to be fine. I don't really necessarily worry about him. I know, he's got the traits, he's got everything. It's going to be different with scheme and coaching. But you're telling me that 2022 Braxton is the first person that you draft in the offensive line in round 5.
Yeah.
In 2023, after you draft Darnell Wright, you don't draft a single offensive lineman the rest of the time.
Right. And I'm convinced that Ryan Poles and Ian Cunningham, both undrafted guys that got their cup of coffee in training camps, look at all of these guys and they see themselves in these UDFA lower, I don't want to say lower end, but guys that have been overlooked.
Yes.
And they see that. And where was the one I want to bring up here? Because it's Axeman says, I'm convinced Ben Johnson got some sort of guarantee. Yeah, he did. He got paid $13 million a year. That tells you who's got the juice in Chicago. Ben Johnson does. Ben Johnson's got more juice than Ryan Poles does. 100%.
Ben and Poles walk into Kevin Warren's offense with conflicting views on what the move is to be.
Yeah.
Ben Johnson wins that argument.
Ryan, go get me a coffee. Ben, now show me who you wanted again.
Yep.
There you go.
Yep. And again, I'm a broken record. Detroit gets what they got out of Jahmyr Gibbs and what they get out of Jared Goff because that offensive line is so good. I love St. Brown. Guess what? That's about it. Like Jamison Williams has some flashes. Laporta, has had that great rookie year. He has some flashes. He's in there. But guess what makes that go? There's left tackle to right tackle.
Right. And where's the... I'm going to start starring these. Right here. Rogue has a question. Shannon Cars, based on the tape, do you feel an improved O-line will noticeably improve Swift's running between the tackles? No. He did it, and he had the same issues in Philadelphia with the best offensive line in the NFL. DeAndre Swift doesn't have great vision. I sat right in the
we saw it at Detroit all the time.
Yeah, in Detroit, and I was in the Chicago Buffalo game that opened up preseason when he took the crazy little dump off from Caleb and racing up he essentially tackled himself.
Yep.
And he cut in, and if he would have stayed right on the sideline, he walks in. There was nobody there. Nobody there. But he did the same thing in Detroit. He's done the same thing in Philadelphia. He's a good player. Don't get me wrong, but he is got to work in tandem. He has to work in tandem. He's going to be here. They're not going to move off of Swift, and that's clearly based off of his contract.
But his contract isn't even all that bad.
Yeah.
But he still has value. Like this idea.
Oh, he does. Right. People saying that he sucks and that's foolish.
He's a slightly above average running back. Right? Like that's what he is, but he's a playmaker. That has value in this league. You know, Tariq Cohen was never going to be, you know, a starting running back. But tell me, Shane, how important was he to this offense, Tariq? Yeah. And what happened when he got injured?
Right.
Do it. What happened to this offense?
Yeah.
You need playmakers, even if it's the Mighty Ducks and Fulton Reed, right? And it's 1 out of every 5, right? If it's 1 out of every 5 touches, he does something. Guess what? That's more than a lot of these running backs do. It's more than what we've had out of Roschon Johnson so far, right? Like
exactly. And Creighton, brought that up there, and it's Roschon Johnson is in trouble.
Ian Wheeler's coming for his spot.
Totally agree. And I mean, the Bears believed that this year, the way that they were using him.
Yeah.
They put him out there, and he had a good game in Buffalo, but he's got the speed element. He's just his pass pro was like bad.
And it was supposed to be one of his strengths.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, I was talking about Ian Wheeler. He couldn't even.
Yeah.
He didn't even have the basics down of it. But yeah, Roschon was supposed to be damn near elite at that. I mean, let's not forget, foundational piece. That's directly from your general manager. And listen, I know that we're all excited about Ryan Poles. Ryan Poles has a massive chance in front of him to correct a lot of wrongs here coming up starting on Monday and then into the draft. But he's got to hit cars. He's got to.
Listen, he's got to feel the pressure. And I feel more confident because Ben Johnson is more confident. Yeah. Ben Johnson has a blueprint for what works. It's not, I'm not talking about scheme. I'm talking about personnel and where the investment needs to be made. If you want to win in this division, you have to control the line of scrimmage.
Yep.
When Minnesota was looking really good, they were causing havoc, swapping players in and out, creating chaos. Guess what happened? Who is it? How many times has that defense in Minnesota given up 30 points? And how many of those belong to Ben Johnson?
Yeah.
All of them in the regular season, because the offensive line sets the tone. Jared Goff looks so much better because they have taken all this pressure off of him, and they have a line and a run game to marry that. You have a different David Montgomery because of the offensive line. You have a different Jared Goff because of the offensive line. My favorite joke, and anyone ever saw those stupid scary movies and they're one where the aliens are invading, and then the crop circles, and the guy hits one in the head with a shovel, and he knocks his head off, and he goes, I figured out their weakness. Without their head, they're weak.
Right.
Guess what? Everybody always would say, hey, if you could just pressure Peyton Manning, he's not a great quarterback. If you could just pressure Tom Brady, he's not a great quarterback. Wow. Breaking news. Why did Mahomes look like garbage in the Super Bowl? Because they couldn't protect him.
Yep.
So if you want to win, you protect your quarterback and you raise hell for the other quarterback. That's it. When Spagnuolo in Kansas City was looking so good, what were they doing? They're blitzing the hell, confusing the other team quarterback and putting them on the dirt. What didn't they do in the Super Bowl? That. Because Philly's line was that good.
Bear Truth 9, is that, do you guys see Hendricks as a real possibility, or are we looking at a Max? What is he in there? Max type player?
Max type player. No.
Okay, yeah, and then drafting an edge early.
No, I don't. Listen, if the numbers that he wants are 30 plus, no. And I don't think they're going to put a trade offer in front of him to go offer a pick. Again, they just are not at a point where they can be doing that. They're going to, they've made their moves on the offensive line side. I think from a trade perspective with things that are coming into this year's draft, that's not going to happen. I think right now they've moved past the trade market and they're on to free agency. I think a name that we also need to get familiar with, Harold Landry, I think is a potential to be in play now that he's been released. To me, Shane, I don't know how you feel. Free agency is where I think they're done in the trade market. The trade market was to get them to this point.
Yeah, and I know there's a lot of people out there, Cars, you know my feeling on this. A lot of people are connecting Josh Sweat to Chicago. Chris Enema brought him up again, and he heard the name connected to Chicago. And I'm out on that move. I'm not there on Josh Sweat. I think he's a good player. I think he's the worst of what Philly had on that defensive line, and he could eat because of everybody else that they had on that defensive line. And I think somebody's going to pay him big time. I just hope it's not us. I mean, that's why I have no issue with throwing a 2-year deal at Khalil Mack and then going out and drafting somebody rather than just throwing all the money at Josh Sweat. I am just not that. I don't know how you feel about it, Cars, but I think he's okay. And I think that's exactly what the issue with pro free agency is. You're paying premium price for a B-, C+ type talent.
It's the same thing with Drew Dahlman, right? Like at Dahlman at like 10 to 11 million, totally get that, right? But once you start pushing 13, 15, 16, 17, 18, I'm not there. But it's free agency, so that's what he's going to get. We've seen this story. Ogunleye, Bill Daniels, right? We've seen this story consistently where a guy who's elevated by other players but happens to hit free agency first gets paid like he's more of the engine, and they're just not. I'm fine with Josh Sweat as a piece as long as you are not overpaying him. And if he's
getting paid.
If he's a day one guy, especially, he's getting right,
paid. Yeah.
But if he doesn't for whatever reason, and you get him at a more, I'm fine with it. He's a good rotational player. That's all he is. He's a rotational defensive end. We're going to pay him starter money to sign him on day one. I have a problem with that.
So Levante chiming in, I wish we as Bears fans would stop talking as if we knew what the Bears organization will do, allow them to do their jobs without complaint. Well, That's what we're here for, Levante. I guess that's a hell of a first comment on TTNL Network for you, but that's what we're here. We're here to talk about it. We're here to talk about things that we would do, things that we hope that the Bears would do, and then to react to it. That's what we do. We break down tape and talk about it.
But I think
And
it's
the Bears don't deserve the benefit of the doubt.
no, because what they should have been doing is not, and the reason that we're here is because they haven't been doing those things.
Yeah.
Like 2 years ago, Shane, we were suffering and going, oh my God, we're going to go pay Mike McGlinchey
Yeah.
$15 million a year
Yeah.
plus because we have not done a good job of drafting prospects. Well, guess what's happening this year? We're going to be potentially signing Drew Dahlman to $15+ million a year, potentially, because we have not drafted centers. In back-to-back drafts where there have been center players available, whether it's Jackson Powers Johnson, whether it's John Michael Schmidt, all the three name guys that you can think of. So yeah, things have changed. A lot has changed. The aggressiveness that you see in picking up a Jonah and a Tooney shows you everything that has changed. They know that there's a spotlight there. There's more pressure there than they've ever had. And that says a lot because guess what? That spotlight was there last year. The pressure was there last year. It is amped up. And when you pay a coach like you've done Ben Johnson, when you go out and get him and have to pull him away from a near ideal offensive coordinator situation, and the way that he's been front and center, and the way that you've added him and paired him with Caleb Williams, absolutely, you're making moves in the trenches. It sucks, but this is what has to happen. And if it doesn't happen, guess what? He's not here next year.
Yeah, and listen, if the Bears can get Dahlman for who was it? Pelissaro said that the numbers are expected to be $13 to $14 million a year. I'm
fine.
I'm not gonna have a issue with that. My issue is when they were talking 18, 19, 20, where he's up in Creed Humphrey territory. He's just not that player or anywhere near that player. That's
you overpay.
Oh, no. I get it. But I couldn't do it. I couldn't. There's no way in hell I'm giving Drew Dahlman $20 million a year.
No, but now you're paying for your sins.
Oh, yeah.
And his sins and Ryan Pohl's sins are extremely well known at this point. And he's got no one else to blame other than himself.
I don't know. Just going back through here, some of these comments to see. Got a couple of them here. Lucas says, Cars, do you think the Poles deserves as much heat as he's gotten this offseason?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's unfortunate, where he's missed big. He's missed very big. And we could talk a lot about the Chase Claypool. I understand that swing, so I'm not going to be necessarily as upset about that as I am about the stupid offensive line stuff. You drafted this guy, and you did this with the belief that Tevin Jenkins was going to stay healthy and take a step, that everybody was going to take a step. You had this belief that the coaching staff, Ryan Poles, to me, Shane, should have been fired after he stood up and fought for Matt Eberflus, because there was enough there that was the problem.
Cars, we all said it. We knew that Flus wasn't the guy.
The team knew.
Yeah, they did.
That he wasn't the guy. More people stood up and fought for Matt Nagy in the team than stood up and fought for Matt Eberflus.
Yeah, and I disagree with Scrolls here 100% because his move of bringing back, like Cars just said, of bringing back Matt Eberflus, and then the pivot after that is Shane Waldron. I still think of the Bears 1920 football drive from the draft when they draft Rome Odunze, and he turns to Shane. He's like, "Is that going to work for you, Shane?
You have too many weapons now.
Too many weapons now." And how many games did he last? 7.
Did he set the record as being the first ever coordinator with what are we doing? That move is great and Caleb is great, but he could have destroyed Caleb in year 1, and we've seen that enough. The fact that Caleb got hit as much as he did and didn't end up injured,
right?
Shocking.
So Zabel's had a grand total of 12 reps at center. They aren't going to take an unknown early. Well, then you're not going to take Gray Zabel then. I mean, Gray Zabel's going to be entrenched. Well, yeah, I mean, I think he can easily be a center, and you don't have to just turn back to last year's draft. Graham Barton from Duke. He was a tackle, and he's a center in Tampa, and he's a fucking great center in Tampa. Had a couple bumps in the road, but that is part of the gamble that you're taking. You have to project with a lot of these guys, and to me, Gray Zabel, I think he can play center in the NFL, and I think he can play it at a high level. And he's going to give you some versatility that he can play inside and buy some time there. If they did sign a Ryan Kelly that would come in and get you, going early, we'll see. But that's just what it is. The NFL draft is projection with a lot of these guys. It's the name of the game. Is it right? Is it risky? Yeah, it is.
But Zabel's another guy that you draft, and I'm fine with it, but you're not drafted him at 10.
Oh, no. I
in a
totally
move down. Yeah. In the Graham Barton range? Absolutely. All day,
Graham Barton went, I think Scottish Bear said he went 26th, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, they moved down, acquired. Well, that shit, if they drop down that far, you're talking a future first plus.
Yeah. But that's the Jackson Dart. Again, you want Jackson Dart to move up. You want him to sit there and be available. I think
Cars, what are we going to do with Brisker with his concussion issues? I have you say your thoughts and then I'll tell you what mine are.
I think they're going in this with him being there, but you're going to see an extension with Kyler Gordon soon, and you're not going to see that with Brisker. I think they're going to play it out because his talent is obvious.
Yep.
It's there. So I think you're going to see another safety potentially picked up somewhere as a backup for him, because I don't think you could fully count on him. But I think they're going to kind of do this fingers crossed thing and hope that he can do it. But I just don't see an extension coming for him anytime soon.
No, neither do I, unless it was super slanted towards the Bears where they can get out of it with no financial responsibility moving forward. But I just don't see it. And I know this sounds crass and awful, but the Bears are going to use him until he's not a Bear anymore. That's just what they're going to use him and lose him. That's the way that it is. I mean, I know it sounds horrible, but that's the NFL. It happens all the time. And listen, Jaquan Brisker is a talent, but he's been in the league 3 years. He's missed time with concussions every year. He's had multiple shoulder surgeries even before he got to the NFL. So it just kind of is what it is. And listen, another guy that you got to talk about there too is Roshan. Roshan's missed extensive time the last 2 seasons with concussions. And everyone is not the same. Some guys are, and the more you have, the longer it can take you to come back. I mean, did I expect Jaquan Brisker to be out for the year? After that hit in Carolina? Of course not. Of course not. But let's not forget, he's a guy that's has he ever played a preseason game?
No.
I'm not sure because he was mixing it up with us on the sideline in Buffalo. He was awesome with the fans, but he was just shorts and a t-shirt. But great dude. Unless it's a wildly slanted contract in the Bears' favor where they're out nothing, I think this is his last year in Chicago. And like
100%.
Carr said, you have to resign Kyler Gordon.
He's
Or
so
extend
good.
him, I mean. Yeah.
He's so
Exactly.
good.
Got a couple here. Kerry Franklin trying not to get in trouble with Mama with these super chats. $10. Life is good. I hope Mama forgives me for this. What a great show. Thank you, Cars and Shane. Thank you, Kerry.
Please apologize. Just blame me. It's my fault. It's
Cars.
my fault. Yeah, it's good.
Don't blame me. I have enough women that hate me. Corn Planter is back. $5. Love me some Cars keys. Cars, I think you can take Braggs.
I know where
especially right now. Yeah, you know where his weak spot is.
I know where he's weak, so it'd be fine. It'd be fine.
Greg Bragg's cat dad now. I don't know if you saw that. Went out and got Addie a new cat.
Oh boy.
Rob Thames, $4.99. Why not draft Zabel at 10 and stick in between our two new guards? I just think that there's more talent, better talent that's going to be available there. That becomes
position over talent.
Yeah.
Right. That becomes biggest need over best player available. If you move down, I will not argue with that move whatsoever. But at 10, that's horrible value.
Yeah, I couldn't do it there. Doyle Collette, can we get a couple Shane and Cars mock drafts tonight? Probably not tonight. We're 90 minutes in, and
for something that he's like, hey, you want to do this real quick?
Yeah, this just came about. We didn't have this planned. This came together in about 4 minutes. Bukowski got me a little fired up on Twitter, so I sent Cars a message. I'm like, hey, we should do a pop-up tonight. So that's why we're here. But you're going to be seeing some shows come up, mock draft Monday shows. I know Big Steve's going to do some. I'm going to do some. Phil's going to pop in and do some. Maybe we can even talk our guy Cars into doing one at some point.
I'm going to start posting thousands of them on Twitter.
Yeah.
Here's mock draft 968, just simply so I could say I had them before anybody else did.
Exactly. Yeah. But yeah, we're not going to do any tonight. We just wanted to pop in and shoot shit a little bit with you guys and talk about it because we got a big week coming up. It's going to be fun, man. It's always fun to add players to your team and to see, how they're going to attack this. Who's the former Iowa safety that played for Washington?
Oh, Matt
Bowen. He brought up a name that I thought was interesting. I think he was on with Hogan Johns. Brought up the name Joseph Asai.
Yeah.
The defensive end from Cincinnati to keep your eye on for Chicago.
That's a good one.
Yep. As kind of an under the radar guy, only 24 years old. And those are the things that I like in free agency if you're going to roll the dice on guys that are still young.
That's why I like
still have that upside,
right? Yep. As an upside guy. And I can't blame him. Maybe he's worried in the offensive line that his quarterback's going to be putting his hands where he shouldn't. So, he might just be a little insecure there. So, or Mekhi Becton, right? Still super young. Those are the ones that you swing all day on. Asai was a second round pick, right? I believe.
Third.
Yeah. You do that all day, every day.
Yeah. He was number 69 overall in 2021.
That's right. Early third. That's what I
Yep. Oh, Lucas, you can just go on Twitter and you can see it. He took a shot at the Bears like he always does, and
he's like
Caleb
all
Williams.
This hype over Geno and over Caleb Williams and Geno Smith and Sam Darnold had better years. And it's like, wow, a 34-year-old and a guy in his 7th year in the league had a better season than a rookie quarterback. Shocking. Although I would say, with 21 and 15 did not look quite the same as
you can't really see. It's kind of small there, but
okay.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I can. Yeah. He said it's hard to express just how much better Darnold and Geno were last year compared to Caleb, but the Bears' offseason hype beast has to eat. So I quote tweeted him and said, yes, exactly. Imagine losing a game at home to Caleb Williams. I can't even imagine. Oh, wait. And then he responded to me with, oh, that's hilarious. You have to use a game that Jordan Love didn't finish because he got hurt to make his point. Even more hilarious, you don't see how fucking lame that is. And I said to Peter, I said, Peter, the Pack get beat and you turn to the Bears within 48 hours to make yourself feel better. It's laughable. You have a better team than Chicago. Bravo. Talk about a low bar. You do your thing, though. You have fucking lame on lockdown. And then it just, proceeded from there. That's who Pete is. I mean, he's
always the one going, Bears fans are obsessed with me and the Packers, and then he will be the one that will randomly throw a stray at us for no reason.
Yeah. So look, Scrolls finally has a good tweet or a good comment in there. He only uses Twitter for research and mature hot wives. There you go.
That's bravo.
That's why Cars came back to Twitter, right? Cars.
Steph shouldn't be watching. So yeah, we're good.
Yeah. I got another super chat here. Rogue $5. Should Brisker wear the Guardian cap? Why wouldn't he? It's personal choice. I mean, they can't be required to. Roshan wore it. Hey, more power to him. I'm not, I don't think they look great, but that's not what it's about at all. It's about your safety and protecting your head. So, I mean, if that's someplace that Jaquan goes, but man, it's tough at those two positions in running back and safety and the play style that Jaquan has. I mean, that was Tommy Tremble, right?
Yep.
That he hit. I mean, that was one of the most vicious hits of the entire NFL season last year. And I'm not sure a Guardian cap was even gonna do anything with that hit.
He's got to make that pivot to kind of a more headier player, right? Like you got to make that change now. That's where you're at in your career. There's no shame in that, but I just don't see him doing it yet.
What's Alex H got here? I think we should have mock drafts only for Bears handled by 3 patrons at a time, perhaps every Monday.
I'm going to go with no.
Yeah. We will have a patron mock draft the week of the actual draft. We're going to pull that out of mothballs this year, but that's I should have a patron be my assistant to watch how I have to set that up and everything that goes into it, because it is a monster undertaking that I don't think people realize, to pull in 32 different drama queens to handle it.
It'll be like, okay, we're going to do this on Tuesday. And then a day later, they're like, oh, you meant like Tuesday?
Oh, this Tuesday?
Like, oh, I thought you meant Thursday, Tuesday. And you're like, I don't even know how that's a thing.
Yeah, I mean, but listen, we got a long ways to go. We may pull on a couple patrons at some point and have them do that. But I know, like Big Steve, I chatted with him last night about it. He's like, man, these mock drafts get kind of addicting. He's like, I'll be at work on my lunch break and I'll start doing one. And Cars, you know how it is, man. Sometimes they're so easy to kill time with, and I tell my son to do them all the time. He's doing it, and it helps him learn players that are in the draft, because he's not watching as much tape as dad is and doing all that stuff. But yeah, it's fun to do. But it's actually a good idea by Alex. We'll end up doing that, pulling on a couple of guys to have some fun, and we'll run it and let those guys decide what they want to do. They're not going to be long shows. They're going to be kind of lightning shows. There might be
So it
even
means
more than
Phil won't be on them, most likely.
yeah, right. We'll put a muzzle on Phil so he can just only make the selections. He just can't
Love
talk.
you, Phil.
Oh man, John, what the hell, buddy? I hope you're
Yeah.
doing okay, man. That sucks. We'll send Angela over. We'll
Oh God, ladies and gentlemen,
help you get motivated.
he'll come over and bring you with his collectibles, and he'll
Yeah.
introduce you to each and every one of them. And Godspeed to you when we do that to you.
Absolutely. But all right, Cars, let me ask you this before we get out of here. Do you have a potential surprise free agent signing that nobody
Ooh.
nobody's talked about, or just throw your hat into the ring here and be like, you know what? This could be a Ben Johnson, Ryan Poles type move that nobody is talking about.
So
And,
I hinted at the one at Jedrick Wills, but
Yep.
I to be honest, the one that I sort of think is an opportunity is Darius Slayton, the wide receiver from the Giants. You've got a
Okay.
need in a third round. He is a different style of wide receiver. He's kind of like Josh Reynolds was for Detroit in that situation. So you've got a need. I think Darius Slayton's a guy, a couple days later that might end up in a Bears uniform.
I threw the name out there a little while. Washington has so much money available, but stay on the same thing as a guy like De'Ami Brown.
Yeah,
the wide receiver can bring you a little bit of a speed element.
absolutely.
And this is something that we've talked about forever with the Bears.
We never have enough speed.
No, they don't. And I mean, it's blinding on, punt coverage, kick coverage, all of that. You just see it. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it goes. I think we're going to be heavy on the lines, hopefully. I'll be honest, I feel like they're going to come out, and I think they're going to be in on Dahlman. That's
Dahlman
just
and
my
Mack, I expect on Monday.
My gut feeling, yeah. So
because as much as I hate it, it gives you again, it maintains flexibility. You're now not locked into anything that you have to do at 10. You're at a true best player available. And guess what? If you don't like any of the players available, you're way more likely to trade down.
yeah.
Oh, Scottish, that would be a fun signing for Dennis Allen.
Yeah, it would be. Yeah. Great point.
But yeah, I really expect early on to see both Dahlman and Mack signed here. And then you kind of go into this going, I've got wide receiver 3 and a couple of, and everything else just kind of becomes depth after that.
Yeah, it just seems like it sure seems like there's smoke to the fire when it comes to Khalil Mack. It's just, I mean, the Bears throwing that out there is, maybe it means nothing, but when every player is a retired player, but then you include, because you didn't really need to include Khalil Mack. You could have been, it could have been,
Julius Peppers more,
or add Lance Briggs or Olin Crew. You know what I mean? It's just, it is what it is, but we'll see how it goes. Monday things will come out. Wednesday is when shit gets real and players can start to sign. And the Bears have been a team that I believe TJ Edwards was the first player signed.
They're fast movers.
DeAndre Swift was the first player signed. So, but yeah, and this is the thing, and we've talked about his warts, and welcome to pro free agency. That's why a 26-year-old interior lineman is available to sign for financial ramifications. There's always warts involved.
And the other reason that he's also somewhat available, right? The Atlanta Falcons are over the cap because they paid Kirk Cousins an ungodly amount of money, And by all rights, it sounds like he's gonna be designated as a post June 1st cut and released. But this is a team. If they were not paying, Cousins I like Jesse Bates, but at no point should you be paying a safety $22 million when the rest of your team has the holes that it does. You've got an older Grady Jarrett that's there. You're paying Anya Meta. I remember when they signed him to that deal when Ryan Pace was here. They've got a lot of bad contracts that they're doing. So part of the other reason that you don't want to go overpay is teams like the Atlanta Falcons, is teams like the whole reason that the New Orleans Saints are keeping David Carr or Derek. I always switch the Carr brothers. The whole reason that that he's staying there is because they're in cap hell and they can't afford to do something like that.
Yeah, well, we will see. So, we popped in. We gave you guys an hour and 45 minutes on this Saturday evening. We're
so exciting to be a dad of kids, right? Remember when our Saturday nights used to be like, I would just be leaving the house now to go meet my friends to go out.
Oh, hell yeah. Yeah.
And I'm getting into comfy pants as soon as this thing is over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We used to head out around 10 o'clock. It's 10:46 here. Well, you're an hour behind me, but so that would track. But yeah, now I'm old and miserable, and
I've always been miserable. Now I'm just old.
Scanning the real estate market every 7 minutes, but we'll see how that goes. But all right, we're gonna get out of here tonight. Thank you everybody for showing up. That's a wrap for season 3, episode 52. Cars Keys. We'll probably be back, Cars. We'll see how some of these guys unfold, and we'll talk about maybe some of the new ones. But all right, love you guys. We will.
Thanks, everybody.
We'll see you soon. Let's get out of here. Hey, new league year. Let's go.
Let's do it.
Bear down. Should we roll out with this for Peter? Maybe.
You've got to be kidding me! Come on! No! I can't! Oh my god! Oh my god! We stink!
Oh dear! Oh dear! Oh dear! Oh dear! Oh dear! Oh dear! Oh dear!
No.
Oh, got it.
Now they have a chance to win the game. What was that call? Come on.
Let's
Block
show,
it. Miss it.
Let's show
Corey,
Lambo.
say it, Corey. Say it.
Fucking miss it. Oh, miss it, you fuck. Let's go. Oh, blocking. No, it's good.
Got it. Well, that was it. The Bears get their revenge. Packers come up short.
It's one of the most embarrassing losses of the Matt LaFleur era. I'm Peter Bukowski.